As you know yourself, he's doing what we're doing here and what we're supposed to be doing everywhere. And it's something he's attending to business, our business. And there's a lot of business to attend to, really.
Yes, sir.
When you think of it, that more and more we are amassing volumes of information, lots and lots of information. And it's hardly imaginable that this information has been there, and yet we were kept away from that information. Now that there has been what you would call a splurge of research, and the more we learn, the more we dig, the more we get, is the more we want. And so it should be, because our history and the things concerning us must be a long one, especially since we were the first on this planet. So we must have a lot of things. And it's the fact that there is so much to do, so much to say, so much to unravel, that's really been the truth that frightens other people. Right. And that is why great attempts, tremendous attempts, even genocide is being made to keep that information away. It should not surprise any of us in the struggle. That's why they attacked Dr. Jeffries, Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Shasi McIntyre. Everybody is being attacked everywhere. Even the few European quote-unquote scholars who speak the truth, and they find themselves doing that, even they are attacked. And you see, what the people who attack don't seem to understand, it's the more they attacked, the more we will know, and people are knowing that this is the truth that they're attacking. And I have no worries and no fears about that, and I'm sure you don't, about the end result. Because everywhere you hear the same stories, that now in schools in Louisiana, in schools in Illinois, in schools in England, they are incorporating this information. Books are being used with this information. So it's a matter of time before everywhere you will find that part of the education of our people. And indeed, they themselves will come into it and be educated. Not that I care two hoots whether they're educated or not, but and I'm sure the same applies to you. But they are going to be able to see these things, and their children will see this thing as it is, and not follow in the sort of blind, ignorant path of their parents. And that path has been a blind, ignorant path, because there is absolutely, I have tried my best, and I'm sure the same thing you will say. I do not find anything, any reason at all for racism. I cannot find it anywhere. Not that I want anybody to love me from their part. They don't love me. That's not their love that I'm after, neither is the love that you are after. But I'm saying, you have to be either, dumb or wicked or both to be a racist. Let me use an example for you. There is an English scholar. He is an elder. His name is Dr. Hugh Trevor Roper. And this man is considered one of the great scholars of the world, as far as they're concerned. He can write histories of Europe, of Britain. He can write about the Second World War. He can write about their great prime ministers and other people, their great queens and all of that. He can write these, what you call, these august volumes about these people. And yet, when it comes to Africa, he can be so stupid. And I use the word stupid, but I'll have to change this word in a minute. Because when I tell you, the man could write in a book that Africans have no history, except the history of Europeans in Africa. The rest is darkness, and darkness is not a fit subject for history. Now, would you credit any man, any scholar to write this kind of thing? But he did, and it's published in a book that was published in 1967. It is not ignorance, really. It's got to be something else. So we can only attribute that to arrogance, white supremacy, racism. That's all we can say. So what I am saying is when, at that level, and he's not singular there, when he says this kind of thing, you know for yourself that there are many, many, many scholars like him who are saying the same thing. If that were not the case, we would not be having this problem that we're having in education today. Because what they are saying to me and to you is a gross insult to our intelligence. You are trying to tell the children, your children who go to your schools to be miseducated, you are telling them, and you are telling the world in your newspapers, your rags you call newspapers, your television screens, you are telling the world that all this thing about Africans is not true. You are wanting the world to believe lies. How can you have respect for anyone who does this? You cannot have respect for their system, for their religion, for anything. I say this blankly because they are trying to tell a lie. They're telling this lie and hanging on to the lie. For what reason? For racism. All right. So what they are in fact saying is that no matter whether it is the truth written or not, African peoples are inferior. They're not like us. And so we are not like them really. We're not like us. And so consequently, we cannot accept them in the world of equality. This is precisely what they're saying. How can you believe their laws? How can you have any faith or any belief in their religion? I'm saying, Malcolm was saying the same thing. I'm not singular in that respect. You have to ignore these people totally. And I mean totally. We have to live as we see ourselves. And we have to go our own way. You can live among people, but not be like them. It doesn't mean that you have to follow. No, really, let us look at this thing before I get into this, what I'm going to say. It all hinges together. What really have they done on planet Earth that is beneficial to us, really? The Caribs were living before they were there. The Caribs they had known what to do with food. They had known what to do with living, making houses, building houses. Up to now, they're building, if the houses built like the Caribs and the Taínos and the Arawaks built their houses in the Caribbean, made out of the hands of the people, not belonging to any union, not being skilled in any kind of European building architecture. They build houses where hurricanes cannot even throw the roof off. There's a proof of that in the island of Dominica at the moment. The Carib, they call them cabes, round houses. They had the most ferocious hurricane in 1979, Hurricane David. It ripped off the roof and threw buildings down that had been built by American architects and contractors and so on. The ones that were built by the Caribs and the Arawaks remained. The way they built the roofs, nothing can remove them. These are people you call cannibals, you call uncivilized. What I'm trying to say to you, we haven't profited. Had the Incas been left on their own, had the Aztecs been left on their own, we do not know where they would have reached. Had Africans been left to their own devices, I am certain, like you are, we would not be in this position today. The building of cars, if we want to look at this, the building of airplanes, these things would have come. It's not only one set of people, because all the knowledge, the theoretical knowledge that they took in science and mathematics to do that, we had already had it, and it is from Africans they took it.
That's right.
We would have interpreted it the same way. Proof of the pudding is the kind of buildings that were built in Kemet and other places long before Europe knew anything. They had little square boxes, little holes for the chimney to go up, where the horses, the stables for the horses of the Moors were superior in comfort and architecture than their own, than the house of princes and kings in France and in England and elsewhere. So we have to understand that. The book that they just had, this brother was showing the book, the Iceman Inheritance, that was brought out again, and with the introduction by Dr. Clark. The Iceman Inheritance, one of their own scholars tells you straight, the trouble with the world is the white man. The man is right, because he has done absolutely nothing to improve the quality of life. Building a car is not improving the quality of life, you know. Having a condo is not improving the quality. You know what would improve it? If he could find cures for all those diseases he brought from his lab and brought them to our people. That is what would be something. You cannot cure a common cold. He's brought AIDS into the world from his lab through his wickedness. And now he cannot find a cure. Some man is saying, some scientist was saying on the television yesterday, oh, in the next 8 years, they think they'll have a vaccine. 8 years? You can't wait for 8 years. You want now. You're talking about now. This is what you're talking about, not 8 years. Arthur Ashe isn't talking about no 8 years. He's talking about now. Poor brother. And I'm saying, these are the things we want to talk about. The fact they're bragging in figures that tuberculosis has come up, has increased, and now it is an epidemic among people. In this country, that's supposed to be whatever it's supposed to be, I'm not even going to mention it's supposed to be this, to be that, to tell me that diseases that had been stopped years ago are coming back again. Well, let me tell you this. Infant mortality even in some of the Caribbean islands is 10 times lower, they just had a report, than it is here, right here. And it's not the fault of our mothers and so on. It is the fault of the government. Black people in the Caribbean now, like black people are here, they're living, their life expectancy is higher than white men here at the moment. Because up to now, they haven't fallen victim to all the sins of North America, as Dr. Eric Williams once called them. So I'm saying, we do not have to look for salvation from them. Salvation rests with us. Redemption is with us. Bob Marley said it and he was right. It is with us. So when people turn around and say about the world and Europe and what they're doing, let us look at it this way. It is not by chance that they're making a big fuss of this 500th anniversary of all the nastiness that was done to indigenous people. Coinciding with this 500 years, when the world was expanded, there was a global expansion of the world by Europe. And as one Jesuit priest said, they left Spain poor, Columbus and the others, and they went back with wealth. Obviously, they got the wealth somewhere. They didn't get it in the middle of the Atlantic. They got it where this man lost himself and found himself. That's where they got it. And they built Europe from this wealth. Their industrial and scientific development and revolution took place on this wealth. It is not by chance, look at it, that this time around now, Europe is closing ranks to become one big white family. The European Economic Community. They didn't say no black economic community, the European Economic Community. They have closed ranks. To do what again? It means if they have the European Economic Community, who are the ones they're going to look at to exploit? Non-Europeans in the world. That's who they're looking at. I hope the Asians, the Chinese are smart enough to be doing their own things. The Indians are smart enough to be doing their own things. The Japanese, if they don't want to be honorable white men, are doing their own things. And more than ever, we must do our own thing. Because at the moment, if we insist, like they insisted before, the colonized countries, of being accepted in any European economic community, we are going to be still the beggars that we were hundreds of years ago. We have to have our own agenda. Do not say it cannot be done. It can be done. They like to say in a disparaging way that Africa is underdeveloped. I'm not ashamed to hear that. I only say that these men should have been killed who came there and raped Africa. They should have killed every one of them. And they wouldn't be saying that. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But Africa is still there. African peoples have the necessary brains wherever African peoples are. They're inventive, they're creative, and they have the necessary vision to be able to do things. But we must do things together. And when we look at it that way, we will understand that it is then and only then we will walk as we want to walk in the world. We don't want to put hands and hug hands and kiss with these people. We don't. But we want them to be in a position where they cannot harm our children and our children's children, and they cannot harm us. They cannot harm Japan today. They are now saying if Japan pulls out in certain things, the recession is going to be even worse if Japan. So they were saying it on some discussion they had on television last night. They're going to be worse if Japan. Can you imagine that? It's a hell of a thing to say. Japan, they gave it a whipping 45 years ago. They dropped bombs, atomic bombs on the country, and now they're depending on those people to get them out of the soup. We must be in a position where they cannot touch us, where they can't put. They say that, all right, we are all over the world. The Japanese are all over the world. The Chinese are everywhere. But still, they have a country that they respect and they love. You go down to Broadway there on 100th Street, and you'll see the amount of Chinese restaurants that are there, or Korean or whatever. You notice that. And you see another thing you notice when you look at those places. You know what you notice? I don't see one African waitress in there. Not one. But they have brothers and sisters that go in there and eat. And even eat with chopsticks, you know. I tried eating with chopstick a few times and I thought my mouth was down here, you know. Couldn't get it up. No, but I'm serious. The Chinese are everywhere in the world. The Koreans or whatever, they're all over the world. So don't say that these people don't have, they have a base that they can respect. Whatever we say Africa is a base. It's still a base for us. In the same way Israel that was found only a few 35, 40 years ago is a base from every little man that's over here now, people that are in here and so on, all these Jewish professors and so on. We have a base. And I'm saying it is when this base can become a serious continent where development, future scientific and other development comes from. That is when we don't have to ask for respect. We will get it. They won't treat us the way they treat us today. They'll treat us differently. You know why? A sister in my class this morning said something, and she was right. It's a thing that I say all the time. Van Sertima says it, and it is true. But for some reason, I don't think our people seem to be getting it as deeply and as profoundly as it should. And it is this. Europeans do not, they tell you about prehistoric times. When they're talking about prehistoric, it means what they're trying to say, times before history mattered, or before there was history. They like to talk about Africa in prehistoric times. In other words, that in itself is denying Africa a history. There's no prehistoric time. History is history, whether it begins in the year 1 or it begins in the year 1 million. It is still history. But they like to do that. But you see, when you look at prehistoric times, there is nothing as far as they're concerned. We know differently. But what they are trying to show is there's a great big vast emptiness of years there. Since, as they say, Africans produced nothing, did nothing, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. Where do they begin to give Africa a history now? You watch that well. The slave trade and slavery. That is where they begin. My sisters and brothers, they will never begin anywhere else but there. And in beginning there, what does it tell us? It tells us many things. We are inferior to them because we were enslaved. We did nothing. We were quote unquote lazy buffoons. It's going to bring that. We had to depend on them for food, for everything. They were the ones that were dishing it out, as bad as it was. They were the ones that were whipping us. They were the ones that were burning us at fires. They were the ones that were chopping our legs off. When you have 400-500 years of that, you tell me any race, that race that is doing that is going to respect the other one? No. Van Sertima says, and those words always stick in my mind. He says, they look at us as stunned survivors who are scratching and groping on the periphery of civilization. And in fact, still depending on the strong civilization of the West to give us life and the necessities that go with life. I refuse to accept that. It places a permanent inferiority on us. We cannot accept it. That is not where our history began. But in their eyes, they will always say, have you noticed something? You remember when in the early stages when they were getting at Dr. Jeffries' neck, they were always saying, asking him one time, Dr. Jeffries, are you saying that because black people have melanin, they're superior to whites? Have you noticed how often they were on about that? You know why they weren't often about that? In their own minds, they have this superiority thing. And who are we to say we're superior to people who used to kick our behinds and burn us at the stake? Who are we? That's what's going on in their mind. Because if you have superiority, you've got to have inferiority to go with it. This is what they're intimating. You notice they were paranoid with that question, if you remember. Every time it came up, every article they wrote, they were on about that. It means in their minds. Francis Cresswell Singh has told us so. They have this white supremacy that you can't, it's worse than AIDS, it's worse than cancer for them. They'll never get it out. Their children can be born tomorrow, the day after, they'll still have it. They don't even have to teach their children. The children will get it like they get a natural thing in them. And I'm saying, at that level, we cannot in any way have any dealings. I'm not saying, in the same way, if we have to develop and build Africa and build ourselves, we can use their labor in the same way they used our labor when they were building their world. There's nothing wrong in using it, but make sure that they are the laborers, and that's all they're going to stay. They don't have any control over what is built, over Africa or anything. They must have absolutely no control whatsoever. There is no African country with a control in Europe or in North America. Why should they have control in Ghana, in Nigeria, and other places? Why? They shouldn't. We are old enough and mature enough to stop that. Our leaders are. So what I'm trying to show is the fact that it is this kind of, no matter what you do, you just have to ignore completely their thinking, and we have to go about our own thing and do it in whatever way or in all ways possible. Whatever is necessary, we have to do it. And we cannot exclude anything. I want to go back. If you read the papers, they like to talk, they love to talk about the countries, the underdeveloped countries. It's underdeveloped and developed. That's all they can say. In this world that is a long time been there, we shouldn't have been talking about that kind of thing. They were the ones that control all the resources of the world, and they're going to go on and still make it that they're going to control the world. You look at the behavior of the United States, and you can see that. The United States is an international cop. The United States believes in having an empire around it. This hemisphere, it said so, and it behaved in that fashion. The United States is always looking for somewhere to invade, somewhere that is weak in military might. They're talking about Haiti. My suggestion to my Haitian brothers is don't allow America to invade Haiti. They're going to do much worse than the generals of today. If you have to get rid of those generals, do it yourself. I can understand you inviting African governments or soldiers to come there, but not from North America or not from England. Because America was in Haiti before, in 1915. America went down there, and they had a job to get them out in 1924. They had to fight to get them out. They have gone to Grenada. You see the results. Nothing has changed. They've gone to Panama to take out one man. And if that man is guilty, most of the men in the cabinet of Reagan are guilty, including Reagan himself. And they're making they're making a monster of Noriega. Look at what they've done to this great big American patriot. What's his name? That colonel, whatever his name was. North. And North, who was going to make concentration camps for black people here in America. They're still on to that. And so I'm saying, you cannot take them seriously. What they did to Noriega, somebody said, one of the attorneys in the case after, the press is always pushing microphones in people's mouths at times like that. Well, he said that many people should not be talking and be glad and happy of what happened to Noriega, because they themselves can find themselves in that same boat. It means America can go to any country, attack the country, kill the people to take one man out to bring them here. And also he said, America has never had any respect for international law. Never. But they're the first ones to talk about other people. This is a country that's the most hypocritical country in the world. There's no other hypocrites that can match these people in their supreme hypocrisy. Especially with that snotty-looking bushman, you know. I say, you know, you never know. Something has got to happen to these people. Something's got to happen. You cannot get away with evil and preach how it's bad to commit sin on a Sunday. You can't do that. And you committing evil all the time. Something has got to happen. And I hope the African gods are listening to me. I hope that something will happen. And we have to set it in motion to happen. Because, you know, they went to Libya. They killed Gaddafi's daughter. And nobody has said a thing. They could have killed, you know, an animal on the desert. As far as they... Can you imagine what would happen if that thieving son of his in SNL had an accident? They'd be screaming and crying all over the television sets. These hypocrites. You know, these anchormen and anchorwomen. They would be crying about it. But they could do what they want. And the other thing, to look the other day, I know many, many people who were unhappy that the PLO chief Arafat did not die in that thing. The amount of people who were regretting that he didn't die, you know. And so this is what I'm saying. One has to understand these things. When I talk, I'm talking in this way. I remember during the war, the Second World War in England. And one of the things that in uniform, I used to hear them saying a lot when we were being briefed by intelligence and so on. They were saying, Goebbels is not telling a lie. Goebbels is not preaching, is not giving out propaganda. Because the bigger the lie, the more effective it is. And Goebbels was saying, I was listening, you listen to some of the things the guy was saying, you know, you couldn't believe it. He was saying the real things he was talking about, the royalty and so on. The British were even prepared to say they understand that because our propaganda is just as bad and just as wicked as his propaganda. It gave me an insight into Europeans when it comes to speaking the truth. To save their skin, they will never speak the truth. Never, never, never. Look at their legal injustice laws they have here. You know, look at them well and see. If you can tell me, after so many hundreds of years, that this is a kind of injustice that can be pushed against people. This cannot be a country, except it's a country, as Frederick Douglass said, of savages. The things they do would put beasts to shame. You remember Frederick Douglass's great speech. He was right. He said it, how many? In 1852 he said it. What he said in 1852 is relevant today with them. They haven't changed one bit. I don't know what a lot of our people, as Dr. J would call them, our Negro achievers are waiting for. If they're waiting for change, I don't know if that's what they're waiting for. I know we in here are not waiting for that. But the thing is this, how much more you have to take. We do not look at the things that happen and analyze them properly. Look at, as I said 500 years ago, they're celebrating this great big, the expansion of the globe for the benefit of Europe, when the modern world started, as they themselves call it. It started then because they began to do wholesale robbing and killing at time. But look at what is happening. They're closing the world into one family, a white family. To do what? To control the world. To control the world. They're worrying a lot about the weapons in Russia. 2, 3 little machines, missiles, where have they gone to? They bothered about it because they think it may have gone to Libya, it may have gone somewhere else, and so they're worrying about it. America is not saying what it's doing with its missiles. America is not saying, and whatever they say that they're doing, I don't believe them. And we should not believe them. So what it means, Russia ain't nothing now, as you know. Russia ain't nothing. So it means Russia is dismantled, demoted, everything. And so consequently, the one strong country in the world will be this one, aided and abetted by a Europe that is all close together. But they're going to have a lot of trouble to get Europe together. You know why? Because these same countries have fought against each other too long and too many times for them to just get together like that. Leave them alone in their soup. Let them see what will happen to them. But when they do that, what I'm saying is the African world and the Asian world have to look at this thing, what is happening. It's serious. It's very, very serious. Because we cannot allow this 500 years to go by that they're celebrating and not have our own agenda really fixed for what we want to do, what we have to do, what is necessary to do. And I say this, you know, I say this, that I am not one prepared to look past and shut my eyes to the question of armed resistance. I'm not prepared to close my eyes to that. Mandela is not prepared. His wife is not prepared to close her eyes to that. She's not. The people who had the American independence were not prepared to close their eyes to that. You cannot close your eyes to that. If it comes, it has to come, it has to come. Death is there. If it has to come, it has to come. Or as it will come, but whatever way it has to come. So I'm saying, you will not be able to remove those people. There are many things that have to be done. Economically, we have to be able to attack them where it's going to hurt them and look at other things as well. Look how they are afraid of armed resistance. Watch this. You, all of us in here remember, I'm sure, do you remember when the Cuban troops were in Angola and Guinea-Bissau? And you know what South Africa said? Get the Cuban troops away so we can negotiate. Why do you think they wanted the Cuban troops to go? Because the Cuban troops were cutting their behind. That's right. That's why we're beating the hell out of them. Yes. That's why they didn't want them there. They were a match for the South African troops. They couldn't match them. They were playing with Fidel's men, but they were playing with the wrong men. Because these were men that could fight the back of them and beat them at it. And anyhow, the Cuban troops went on. But in a sense, we have to have the philosophy of Fidel Castro. When he was asked, they were asked why they're sending troops to Africa. Fidel said that Cuba is 99% African, and it has a right there. The troops have a right there. But I think it's a cheek to ask, why should Cubans send troops there? These people who are from Europe send troops there for hundreds of years. What am I hearing? So it is good for them to do that and not good for the other side to do it. We drink this thing. Our politicians who are supposed to be educated in their universities eat, drink, and sleep this kind of garbage. And we can't look to our politicians, you know, to them to do anything. Not at all, because there's not, I see that Reverend Allen is saying now that there's some people from inside who are our leaders. Let them fight with the way they can fight inside. But those outside have another way to fight. Maybe that's true. But those inside, what I would like to tell Reverend Allen, those inside ain't fighting at all. They ain't fighting at all. They're fighting for increase of money, or they're fighting to looking for a scam. This is what they're fighting for. It is those outside that's going to shake the apple tree for the apples to fall. The ones outside, it has always shown to be the same thing. And so, when Reverend Al gets inside there, he's going to have a rough time. I hope he does get it, but he's going to have a rough time. But I know if he takes up the stand that Adam Clayton Powell takes the stand, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And I have no reason to doubt that he'll take that stand. But I'm saying, you have to take up that stand. You cannot go in there, take up the stand of our Yamaka mayor, you know. You can't take up his stand. And so consequently, what I want to say is the mentality, the attitude of Europeans will never undergo a change. I'll tell you why. Let us look at as long as I can remember, and perhaps you can remember, they've always been talking about the third world. Now, the third world, you would imagine there's only one world. But the third world is an economic, political, racial, and educational phrase brought up by them, made by them. Again, the same thing Francis Cresswell was saying, white supremacy. The third world means there is a part of the world that's inferior to the first world. If there's a third world, there's got to be a first world. They don't have to say who's the first world because they take it for granted that everybody knows that Europe and North America is the third world. And all the white dominions, Australia, etc., New Zealand, Canada, that's the third world. Fine. The second world was a world that's not as strong. It was a world that was socialist. Now, it doesn't exist in their minds, as far as they think that Marxism has gone to hell and it's not there anymore. So if there's a third world, it is a creation by the West, by the first world. We have to stop talking in terms of a third world. And I have done a study of this thing, and what I'm going to say is this, that the third world in my eyes and in your eyes does not exist as far as I'm concerned. It does not exist. Let me illustrate it this way. What I want to say that this third world, you and I cannot defend a third world. It does not deserve a defense. If you are defending the third world, you are defending a guilty world, a world guilty of keeping itself in underdevelopment and poverty. You are not looking at the causes of the underdevelopment, the causes of the poverty. You are blaming the peoples of the third world. When they say that, what they are trying to say is all that I have gone before and reiterated to you is that we are inferior and we do not have the capacity, the mental and the intellectual capacities to be a first world. And in any case, to be a first world means that you have to model yourself on their premise. I am not prepared to model myself on them. Neither should any one of us in here. If we are creating a world, let us create an African world. That's what we should be about. Not a first world. It will automatically be a first world. And therein is going to lie a lot of problems with them, not with us. So I'm saying that, let me put this in your mind. What is this third world anyway? And where is the third world? I mean, where does it begin? Where does it start? Where is it at all? If we say third world, we are not talking about regions. We're talking about people who happen to live in regions. Now, all right, what about these people who come? Say, like, for instance, if we call Jamaica a third world country, it doesn't mean we are meaning not Jamaica, you know. We're calling Jamaicans third world people. What about Jamaicans that are here? What about Jamaicans that are in England, Jamaicans that are everywhere? It's the same thing with Puerto Rico and all these countries that we could lump together as third world. Their peoples are all over the world. So in other words, if you're talking about a third world, this third world is scattered everywhere, even in the first world, if you have to look at it that way. And you're looking at the first world as the rich countries. How many countries of Europe, really, that you could call first world? You can't. What new experiments, new inventions have they brought about? Going to space? What has that going to space done? Can you tell me for the benefit of mankind yet, or the world of humankind? I haven't seen it yet. Maybe, I don't know, but I doubt it. I doubt it. There's billions and billions of dollars that are spent. So let us put it this way. And if we accept, the fact is that I'm establishing in my thing that the third world, as a world apart, as a world of peoples, does not exist. It doesn't. What exists are countries in which African peoples, Asian peoples, and so on lived that were colonized by imperialist powers for their own benefit. And the creation of these colonies was a deliberate creation by Europe, or by quote-unquote the first world. The first world came into being at the time of Columbus, their concept of a first world, when they began to take lands and use all the lands. Now, when you talk about a third world, what is it? What are we talking? We're talking about politics, we're talking about economics, and we're talking about military affairs. Now, we're talking about, the main thing we're talking about is domination. If we're talking of dominance, as they like to use in terms of the third world, politics. Who controlled the politics of these countries up until about 40 years ago? Europe, Britain, North America. Who controlled the economics? By force of arms, these same countries, to build their own. So the third world in there is a creation, again, not of the people, but of the dominating people of the first world, or the quote, their world, that were there. And it was not something, the third world was not something that was accepted openly, and we sat down and did nothing about it. Because from the time Europe entered into Africa, the Caribbean and elsewhere, people have been fighting to get away. There's been struggles all the time. Don't worry about what they say about the abolitionists. Africans have been fighting for their liberation from the beginning, from the word go. They were fighting from the time they were leaving the coast of Africa right up until today. They were fighting for their liberation. So in other words, they were not prepared to accept, in a general rule, this question of dominance. They accepted it because in the final analysis, when government could not succeed in stopping them, they used what they themselves, a phrase they dug up called gunboat diplomacy. In other words, they began to use arms to be able to control the people. When Britain wants to control some riot or something in the Caribbean, they send troops. America does the same thing. So in other words, what they want a permanent, to keep a permanent situation, a third world situation that they created, leave it in existence. There was absolutely no reason why America should have invaded Grenada. When, during that time, the IMF conducted a survey of these islands in the Eastern Caribbean, and do you know what the IMF report is there? The IMF report said that of all the countries, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Dominica, Martinique, Guadeloupe, of all these countries, that's in 1983 when the assassination came about, the one country that was showing any visible progress was Grenada, under Maurice Bishop. Unemployment was cut down from 34% right down to 14%. There was free schooling from kindergarten all the way up. Free meals for children. Universities people could go to. They were self-help. They were opening markets with Cuba, with China, with other places. Grenada was opening markets with countries that they had never had business with. Bishop the country was moving up. America does not want to see that. America wants these countries to be dependent on America all the time. There was no need to invade. The excuses were lame, stupid excuses that some Grenadans shamed, some African people shamed the rest of the people, of their brothers and sisters, by saying, oh, we thank God America came and saved us. They said that the people were suffering, the students there were having, the American medical students that were there in the medical school were having a bad time. When they were saying that at the time, those girls, those white American girls that are at the university there, were in bikinis, were in handkerchief-sized bikinis on the beach, playing about with some of the brothers and so on, having a good time, drinking and cavorting. They said, what's this all about? What's this thing that we're in danger? The brothers were more in danger from them than they were, I can tell you that. They always are. And so, what was the danger? There was no danger. The other point, the airport. The airport was being built. You remember what that cowboy said? It was missiles and so on, and all this thing he was saying. And Grenada does not need such a big airport. Doesn't need that. This is what this buffoon said. And what happened? When, after the invasion, what did they? They killed people. They bombed a mental hospital. People were going out naked. They didn't know what it was about. And they, fancy, doing that to the country. And what he goes and does, the same airport that was too big, too long, too everything, he goes and gives American aid and they build that airport for Grenada. And the height of really shame is that airport is now called the Ronald Reagan International Airport. Yeah. Can you believe it? I told a Grenadian brother, don't ask me to come and see if I can't come on a boat or on a sloop or something. I'm not coming on no airport to land in that airport because I hated Reagan so much that something might happen in the plane that I'm going to land in. I ain't coming there by plane. Ronald Reagan, and they got Reagan to go down and bless them to open the airport. And he had so little shame that he went down there and at the opening ceremony. That is what they mean by dominance, the dominance of our people. When they talk about the dominance of the third world, of countries over the third world, what they are saying is that they themselves intend to exert this dominance on a permanent basis. This dominance, it tells me that it refers to unequal relations existing between the developed capitalist countries and the countries of Africa and the Caribbean. That is what unequal relations. So the relations between the third world that they created and the first world is an unequal one economically, politically, constitutionally, educationally. It's an unequal one. And as long as there's a third world, there will always be an unequal relationship with the first world. In other words, with the world of Europe. Always. So this is something that we must remove from our thinking, remove from our vocabulary, remove totally if we want to create a new society that is African. We have to remove that. Because the third world is not our creation. It was theirs. And it conjures up things that are nasty and bad. And within this relation that I'm talking about, economic, political, and culturally, in fact, what has happened, it has affected our cultures. Yes, sir. The European false, superficial culture has come in, and in Africa and in the Caribbean and elsewhere, and has caused, again, our cultures to literally go underground almost. The fact of life, the presence of life, the presence of living is always a European one. I'll bring it with language. in countries in the Caribbean where they speak a Creole, you cannot go to school and pass any exam in Creole. If you're in an English-speaking country, you got to pass that exam in English. Your papers have to be corrected in England. If you're in a French country, you have to do it in French. A French colony then. The same thing with the Spanish. You know their national languages in the Hispanic areas is Spanish. So again, that in self shuts the door on our culture and makes our culture go underground. Even the religions of Africa have to operate. Not a lot of people do practice it, Santeria and so on, but it's not openly practiced like, say, the house of God, the church of God, born again, redemptress, all of that. They have all these little places all over the Caribbean. All these people that are here, these sex perverts that they send to jail, those electronic priests and so on that they have here. They come down to the Caribbean and on Sundays, tomorrow is a field day. In one street where my brother lives, there's 3 of them. 3 different churches. And you see on the veranda in the morning, when I was down there the other day, the little children coming down with their bags, with their handbag, shopping bag. Their mothers give them food and cake, and they have nice little white socks on, and nice little shoes, and nice white dresses, and their hair done, combed. They put a lot of coconut oil, and it's well combed, and they're going to church. Now those kids are going there from 8 o'clock in the morning. They're going to go back at 6 o'clock at night to their walk back to where they came from in the dark. And they're singing hymns, hallelujah, all kinds of hymns are going on, clapping and beating of tambourines. I don't hear any drums in those places. And that goes on every Sunday. Now when their mothers and fathers go home, that's not enough. They turn on the television set to watch, when he was popular, Swaggart and all those other people. And they sit down there, with my brother's wife. She tells me that I notice on Sunday, every time this is coming on, you take the car and you go down to the beach and you stay out all Sunday. And when you come back in the night, you just come back for a short while, you take a shower and you go out again. She said, why don't you sit down and get a little God inside of you? I said, no, the African gods are there. They won't allow the European God to come in. And she said, oh boy, I don't know what they'll do with you. Your brother is not like you. I said, that's why he's stupid. He's not like me. She said, don't call your brother stupid. He's not stupid. She sits down there and she takes all the shows. More than that, she got tapes. And she says, the only thing that hurts me is that I cannot send and ask a question from here. I said, why can't you? When they're taping it, you get on your telephone, and it's going to cost you some pence, but you get on your telephone and send a message and ask a question, from these fakes. I said, all of them fakes. Oh, you mustn't say that. I said, I say worse, but I won't say it to you because the language is very terrible, what I have to say about them. But that goes on in all the homes that you want to see. On a Sunday, the young brothers and so on, they jump in their cars and so on. They're not in this kind of business. But the majority of the people from about, say, 35 upwards are into that. Apart from the fact of going to the cathedral, going to the Church of England, the Anglican Church, the Presbyterian Church, going to the Methodist Church, they take religion on 24 hours on a Sunday. Like this is Lent now. Oh my God, the place is doing a thriving business, those churches. Monies, arms, and everything. And what do they get for it? Now, they get cast-off clothes from white people in the South and Missouri and so on. And you see those children wearing cast-off clothes. And they wouldn't wear my cast-off clothes, but they will wear cast-off. I said, who you know? The guy might have been a Klansman. What you talking about? You wearing his clothes, and his spirit, his evil spirit is in his pants. Still. They'll have, and then all those tin foods that America gives away, and all tin butter and things. All of that they send down there. On a Saturday, they go and collect tinfuls, all that kind of tin stuff that's full of cancer. They go and collect it, and they're eating that. They said, at least the church is good to us. You wouldn't give me that. I said, you damn right I wouldn't give you that food. Because I don't want to give you cancer. I'll give you something else. You know. But you cannot, you really cannot tell. And the government encourages that. You know what? Because the government gets a little thing from them, and they usually back the government. And when they're campaigning with the parties, they send money from head office or whatever in Nebraska, wherever the heck they are, and they do that. So it's something in the Caribbean that's going on that needs to be looked at very seriously, that kind of thing. But quite apart from that, I'm saying these are the things that cause the concept of third world to last. The other thing I spoke about, dominance. What about underdevelopment? That's a term that we should forget. We're not responsible for that. We should think in terms of development, because we are going to do the development. As I said, if we find ourselves in a position where we have to use their labor, be it skilled or otherwise, let us aid them, but they have no control over anything. Not before our people get the necessary labor that they should get. You're not going to take an American engineer before you take a white American engineer, before you take an African American engineer. You wouldn't, I would prefer not to do that. I wouldn't do that. This is what I'm talking about. Because we have skilled people there that can do it. They can do everything that they can do. We can do it, and many times better. So I'm saying, we have to start thinking in terms of dependence. Dependency comes again from what? From you, from us, individually and collectively. Don't think about underdependence, because that is a negative thought in your mind. We know that underdevelopment is there. We should be thinking of development. What we are going to do to remove the condition so that we can improve our countries and get the kind of countries that we want and be the people. Because underdevelopment refers to and what's more, in my mind, it refers to me, when I hear that, of a continuous super-exploitation of our people. That is what it brings up in my mind. Super-exploitation of people. People who are consumers. And people who, if you're a consumer, you are at the beck and call of whatever price is put on it. Let me give it to you this way. Michael Manley said this some time ago, although he's changed now, and I'm very sorry the way he's gone now. But still, what I'm saying is the fact that you borrow money from the IMF. Every single country has borrowed money from the IMF. You got to pay them back. They can't even pay the principal. You pay the interest. Now, listen to this. They put stipulations in the IMF, guidelines. You have to follow these guidelines. If you have somebody in your government that is suspect, his politics is suspect, they will hint to you, why don't you get another government minister? Why don't you, this guy is, we have information that they will lie to you and tell you that. So you find some way of getting rid of the brother to get somebody else. And who are you going to put there? Somebody that is safe. But safe for who? Safe for the IMF, safe for the State Department. What is more, the equipment you have to use to work the land, the tractors or whatever you're getting, you have to buy from America. You got to buy it. And if you're going to build a big airport, you must make sure you have to give a guarantee, you'd sign on the contract, that so many engineers, top engineers at management level, are being employed from here. And always the top engineers are white. So in other words, the IMF money goes back to America and IMF countries. And so you do not gain anything. You can't buy. You could never say you're going to buy no tractor or nothing, or you could get in an engineer from Cuba. You're in serious trouble. The man will just take his papers, tear it up, and walk away, fly away. You have to. So the IMF has this super exploitation I'm talking about. You cannot even use the money as you see fit. Now what they're doing, it's even worse. When you get IMF money in the Caribbean as elsewhere, They send what they call people who audit your books, people who are there to see how the money is spent. And before the Minister of Finance signs the voucher, the IMF auditor has to sign it as well. So you cannot do anything against the wishes of the IMF. That's the way these people are getting money. And Manley himself said, we were talking some months and months last year, and he was telling me, you know, one of the things that hurts me is that generations of Jamaican children that are not yet born in the next century will be paying, will having to work and pay for this money that they never benefited from. I said, you mean never benefited? I said, you now are not benefiting from those. He says, what is the answer? And I jokingly told him, do what Fidel says, don't pay them back.
That's right.
You know, don't pay them because they owe enough money. You know, they owe these countries. Now, these are things seriously. So we have to look at these things seriously. We talked about underdevelopment. And in other words, we are super exploited by the dominating societies. And the dominating societies are from Europe and North America. We've talked about that. What else are we looking at? Let us look at dependency. How do we see dependency, a concept in the third world made up by them? Dependency is the kind of structure that they create so that you have to depend on them. Like what I was saying is that what I was saying again, they will tell you, like Reagan did, the Caribbean Initiative Basin Initiative, where certain Caribbean goods will come into America without having to pay this great big duty and tax that they pay. When you hear the sound, at the same time you're allowing them to come in without having those certain goods, little goods that's coming into America to be sold here in the American market. Now let me ask you this. The little things they make in the Caribbean, do you think America, one of the most highly manufacturing countries in the world, you think that's going to have any effect on the American economy? No. In return now, you have to allow them to send all their goods to you in the Caribbean to sell. And you know, America, one of the reasons America wants empires is because the domestic market is swamped with its goods. And America cannot depend. The United States, I don't like to use the word America with the United States. The United States, not any America at all. The United States has swamped its markets, its internal market. So it's got to send its goods outside to be sold. Otherwise, this economy would be shaken as it is now. So it has to be selling outside, selling cars everywhere, selling corned beef, selling whatever, everywhere in the world it has to be selling. And these countries, all the Latin American countries and the Caribbean, are merely markets for these goods. I don't know how many of you ever went to Jamaica during the time Siaga was in office to see the supermarkets in Kingston and elsewhere, chock full of food. And people were saying in Jamaica, you see that? Manly gone, look, our shelf full of food. They're not worrying what kind of food it is, you know, but the shelves are full of food. Now the shelves are empty. They don't know where to turn. But it's this kind of thing that we, in the countries that they designate the third world, we do not give thought to. And this question of dependency, the areas of dependency, I mean, food, for instance, is a serious thing, particularly food. And nowadays it's coming to the question of cars and things that are on the television sets. There is not one island, no matter how poor the people may be, they have television sets, VCR. I know a friend of mine who has a little two-room house, and the man has a Magnavox that's nearly as big as the room. And you know, he plays and he has his VCR, And when he's playing his VCR, the whole yard sits down and watching that, you know. And he passes drinks and so on around, you know. It's like it's a community. I mean, I can see that part of it, you know. But I'm telling him, Oscar, man, you're showing the people the bad things. Not to mention, late at night, he has friends and he shows some very funny films on his VCR. I don't have to tell you. But he shows some very funny films on his VCR. And, but the thing is that these things have swamped. You go into a home now, it can be in the most rural of rural areas. There is a big fridge in the place that can hide, you know, it can hide a 6-foot man. Those fridges have all sorts of things. Washing machine, they're not satisfied. I said, man, you've been washing in the damn river all the time. Now you telling me you haven't washing machine. They have washing machines in the room. They have drying machines. They have everything that's going there. The best bed, everything. Now, all right, if you use your money from bananas on that, okay, that's fine. You're making it a little comfortable for yourself. But what I'm saying is to buy all those things, they are bought with foreign currency, American dollars. You are buying American commodities. They swamped the whole of the Caribbean. Now, I can see what you see here now on television at this moment. They're seeing it in the Caribbean. They're seeing the same thing. A thing that will surprise you. You think our people love soaps here? You should go down to the Caribbean. When I come in the house, my brother's house with Cynthia, this religious lady, a nice lady, but you know, she tells me during the time of soaps, she says, Ed, I can't talk to anybody, you know. The phone is off the hook and so on.
Oh, no.
And she can tell me all the names and what's been happening. She likes this one. I said, Cynthia, don't ask me. I don't know their names. The only thing I can tell you, I know a title called The Guiding Light. That's all I know. I don't know anything else. I can't tell you what's on there. She said, you mean to tell me you live in America and you don't know these things? I said, I don't. And she's not alone. When they meet for prayer meeting, like yesterday, Friday was prayer meeting, and they go up to a place called Calvary. It's called Calvary. There's a huge cross up there. If you pass, when you fly over the island, you see this huge cross. When you pass by ship, you see this huge cross. And they go to a little grotto there to pray. And they take up sandwiches, they take up tea, and those who like it take up a little thing to strengthen the tea, you know, the coffee and so on. They take up a little, you know. Before they can do that, they first of all, they gossip about all the sins that are happening there. Who's going with who? Whose wife don't know she's it? Whose husband don't know his wife has his best friend? Well, all of that go. They come up there to pray, you know. Then the next minute, when they finish praying, they're now going to talk about the soaps. They're talking about the soaps. And then after they finish talking and eat and so on, they start Hail Mary full of grace, you know. That's what they do on a Friday evening. You know, and she tells me, Ed, you know, we prayed for you. I said, please don't. Please don't. I said, why you have to pray for me? She said, because we know you know how you don't believe certain things. I said, I don't, because they're not true. And anyway, I'm saying, this is what? Dominance is a thing that has to be removed, because dominance depends, as long as we are in that category, we will always expect that the consumer things that we need, we have to get it from outside. That's another term, as far as we're concerned, that should be removed. That we are so dependent on that the indigenous governing class continues to have good relationship with countries like America, like Britain, and so on. So that they always feel that they will get financial handouts. They will never think of having a summit meeting to discuss the future of the Caribbean in the Caribbean. They just came back from Europe. And while they were in Europe, they were discussing with Britain and with France and the other countries, they were discussing when the European Economic Community comes into effect next year, what will be the position? They're asking these Europeans, what will be their condition, their position, when they form this big closed White House? I told the Prime Minister had come back while I was down in the island just after Carnival. She came back the second day of Carnival. So she met me, she buttonholed me, and you were talking to me. So I said, I hear you just came back from Europe. What were you doing there? She said, oh, I went to see the European Economic. I said, why should you go and see them? You have no right to go and see them. You have to see each other down here. I said, what you went to discuss? We went to ask them what their position. I said, I'm surprised that you don't go and ask these people what their position is. You have no position there. You make your agenda and have your agenda down here. What have we got to offer? You know what I turned around and said? I said to her, I know her very, very well. This is no exaggeration. I know her extremely well. I said, Eugenia, you should be ashamed to ask her, what have you got to offer? What have you been doing for 12 years in office? What have you been doing? You're now telling me, what have you got to offer? We have a lot to offer. But we're not standing on our feet like men and women. That's what we're not doing. And it is not only one island. All the islands have that tendency. They don't want to join together in a community to be able to solve the problem. They have ambassadors from everywhere. They have ambassadors from Taiwan. They have ambassadors from Korea. They have ambassadors from here. You think they have one African ambassador? No. They don't have one African ambassador in those islands. Not one. And you know, they talk about Pan-Africanism. I said the concept of Pan-Africanism took root too in the Caribbean with George Padmore and people like that and Henry Sylvester Williams. It took root there. What has happened to them? What has happened to this? C.L.R. James and these men, they must be turning in their graves to hear that, to see that. And they sincerely feel, this is what I'm talking about. The concept of the third world is not dead. They talk about this in the world system. They're prepared to keep themselves, these countries that have been designated third world, a phrase that I hate, they're prepared to keep themselves in what they describe as the world system. The world system is a capitalist one, is dominated by industrial development, commerce, science, and so on, of which the countries designated also the third world cannot play a part at the moment. There is one thing that has been done, and it has never been utilized. In the Caribbean, like Africa, there is a tremendous brain drain. We have, and here too in America, look at the men and women that we have who can handle computers, who can handle science, who can handle... We have people in the NASA program, we have astronauts, we have women of tremendous caliber working in those places. What are we doing with them? You know who they're benefiting? White America. That's who they benefit. When we live here and we have a computer whiz, which we have, who does he go and work for? IBM. Look, I'm not blaming. I'm saying the system is structured that that seems to be the only alternative. Or AT&T or any of them. I went and gave a lecture last year at AT&T in New York. They sent a limo from, I should have known that was big headquarters. They sent a limo for me. They did. And when they said, I came and said, I felt my bell was ringing. And I came down, I said, yes. He said, I'm looking for Professor Scobie. I said, speaking. He said, I've been sent here for you. I said, I thought as a friend of, that was, you know, one of the guys that worked there was coming for me. I know a fellow that worked. I thought, he said, no, they've sent me to get you. Man has his hat a brother, black brother, a brother. His hat and his thing, and he took me in the limo. I sat in the limo. I said, well, there's very few times I may never have that opportunity again. Let me make myself comfortable. The man drove me right to the door. And what was worse, I went in, I met the big head man or whatever, and a few head people, naturally white. And then they said, well, you come and meet the people, go in 1 or 2 departments. So I went in and I spoke. I said, They said they were having a lunch afterwards. So I said, I wouldn't have a lunch. I'm a man that looks to go to, I know to sit and have a lunch, you're going to sit down and talk a lot of rubbish to people, and you ain't going to enjoy the food, you know. So they said there's a lunch prepared for you. So I said, I'm in trouble. So I was telling a brother who does, he goes to the First World all the time. Brian, you know Brian? Yeah. Brian is the one that had introduced me to this thing. I said to, Brian was there. I said, Brian, I'm going to be in trouble. He says, why, Professor? I said, Brian, you know what I said the First World is precisely what I'm going to say here. Perhaps it will be worse, just for wickedness' sake. It's going to be worse. So Brian said to me, he said, Professor, just say what you got to say. And boy, I said what I had to say. I notice a lot of red faces and what have you, but that gives me a nice thrill to see red faces. I love to see red faces because I know it's going home, you know. So when they were finished, a brother that was there dressed with his clothes and his belt tie and his nice, well-dressed, tall brother, he comes from Harlem. He tells me, I'm going to take you to show you the department where I work. So I go with him before we're going to lunch, and he's going to take me to the toilet to wash my hands and all that kind of business. So he's taking me around. So he takes me to this department, and this department, there's a lot of white people in there. And so I, like a fool, turn around and tell him, so you're the only brother working in here then? Only the African brother working in here? He says, no, I'm the manager in here. I nearly fell when he told me that. He's the manager in there. So I said, well, maybe I'm talking to a Tom. So the guy said, no. He had got a book of poems that he'd written, and he gave me the book of poems. And the man is more militant, at least in his poetry, than Brother Al Sharpton is. I said, do they know about this? He said, yes, I've given out prayer. I have the book. And he wrote one on the First World too. But I say, you can never judge people when you watch them like that. Now, this guy has a big position there. I said to him after, I hope you last there. So I must ask Brian when I see him today if the guy still works there, you know. I go for lunch, and one lunch, they have all sorts of things there. One beautiful room with pictures and carpets, and I said, that's alone going to put me off my food. You know, anyway, I stayed in there and I ate, and there those white people, you know, they like to ask questions. But what I'm saying, now this brother was telling me, a lot of our young people that come from colleges and so on, they're taken and they give them training. So when they give them training, it means they are lost for any other. So they are in there. And he says that is happening all over America. And so that led me to think, you see this thing, we talk about, we have people at colleges universities have been open for them, true. But we're not going to benefit by them. Because it's a difficult thing for a young person to want to make up his mind to leave, to go to Nigeria, to do this kind of work. I am not finding fault with them. I'm just saying it's a difficult decision to make. You know, you have to think of a lot of things. So I'm saying the same thing. You know what? A Ghanaian brother was telling me. He is a Ghanaian businessman, and he works working in this, again, he has to do with computers. He says, I know there are a lot of Ghanaians here in New York. We want them to come back to work down there. They won't come back. They say the money is not enough. And I said, well, what are they doing here? He says, a lot of them, they're driving taxis around Harlem, you know. I said, well, he's driving taxis to make up his money. Some fellas were still going to, but they prefer to do that. Then go back to Ghana and so on, and but this is what we have all over. The Caribbean is no different. The Caribbean is the same thing. This third world dependency, it is still there, and there is a reason for it. Because I know people who go back as doctors to the Caribbean and as engineers, in the engineering departments and so on. When they have any big project to work on, like there's a big sort of project with bridges and to dredge rivers and so on, they get American equipment. They're getting it for next to nothing. They have IMF money. They're getting paid. Now they get American engineers who are supposed to be experienced to come down there and be the head of the work, while these young engineers from Jamaica, Dominica, wherever, are their juniors. And what is worse, they're giving these American engineers the pay that they were getting in America, which is not chicken feed, those white engineers. And they're paying the young Caribbean, the African Caribbean engineers, the wages they give them there, which is chicken feed. I can tell you that. It's not fair. And who does the dirty work? The young brothers are doing all the dirty work. And these fellas get the benefits. And it's the same thing with building. You look at it in every way you want to look at it. This is happening. This, again, is a third world condition that we're talking about. This kind of dependency I was telling you about. And it's the kind of thing that you have with always this kind of world system, this kind of attitude, this kind of situation that we have. It's brought about by the system, the world system. What is the world system? Monopoly capitalism. Monopoly capitalism. So this system makes it in such a way that the dependency syndrome will always be there. I explained to you what happened with Grenada. When Grenada was attacked, Grenada was the one country doing very well. Yes. And yet they were attacked because the United States did not want, they do not want any of the countries to get anywhere, to progress without their control and their help. The more we look at it in those countries that they call the third world, that are not really any world of our making, it's a world of their making, a world of dominance made by, quote unquote, the first world developed people. What happens? When any of these Caribbean countries, or any of the countries in the Americas, apart from the United States, want to become members of any organization, whether it's a United Nations or whatever organization, they join these organizations for one reason. Take one of them, the OAS, the Organization of American States. Every little country in the Caribbean has joined the OAS. Why have they joined it? Because as you become a member, you're given money, a loan. So all of the countries joined, Barbados, Dominica, Trinidad, you name them, because of that. And what is more, they give scholarships to the young people, our young people. They give you scholarships to do certain things, but you always watch. It's scholarships to go where they want you to go and where they want you to study. And they have internships and all that kind of thing. So we in the Caribbean think, as African people, our people are getting something, but what we are getting in those terms is chicken feed compared to what the condition of the United States in the Americas. The United States has visioned itself as a dominating country in this hemisphere. For military reasons, for strategic reasons, for trade reasons, for everything. It has decided that it must have an empire here. And now, being that it stands almost alone in its might, its eyes have turned to the rest of the world. And consequently, it's going to be difficult for countries in the Caribbean and African countries to be able to have the kind of men and women who will be strong enough to remove this dependency syndrome of the third world. It's a thing that's going to last until we people of those areas allow it to last. Because it's a thing that was created by the first world people, if there's such a thing as the first world. And the other thing I wanted is capitalism, the kind of capitalism I'm talking about. I am not necessarily making out a case for Marxism. Please get this straight. I'm making out a case for a system that is going to utilize some indigenous qualities. Frantz Fanon said, and Fanon was right, he said that it is about time we stopped imitating Europe. We stopped imitating and building institutions like Europe. Every generation has its role to play. In the countries they so wickedly call the third world countries, we must create for ourselves. We must build for ourselves. But we must also go back and look at the indigenous qualities that are there that we have never made use of before. We have never really made use of our brain unless that brain has been trained by them. We do not accept our brain unless it is trained by them. So I cannot say, as Fanon says, I cannot say that we use our natural intelligence. And everyone is endowed with natural intelligence. But that natural intelligence on its own will not do. It has skills that you get and you learn. We really have not done that. If you look at the governments of the Caribbean, they are all fashioned on Europe style of government. None of them are fashioned with the kind of government of the people, the kind of things that people require. The people themselves at the grassroots level are saying that the politics of the Caribbean has to be motivated by the will of the people. Government must not use the will of the people to bend it. They must not be allowed to do that. The people must have a say in all that is being done in the Caribbean. This guy knew that. Maurice Bishop knew that. And he entered into a position of self-help, utilizing everybody. Again, the United States was wicked and evil and smart. They pushed the CIA there to cause destruction. And they got members of the Central Executive fighting with other members, with the result, you know the result, we don't need to go into it. And it is this kind of qualities that we have not examined when we're talking about the third world. We're talking about these countries. And I won't go further into this, but what I'm saying is this, to come to a conclusion, is that we look at this question of the third world, and the same dynamic that motivated the removal of colonialism in the period when the countries were seeking independence, both in Africa and elsewhere. We have allowed ourselves to stand there. Curiously enough, honestly, nothing seems to have happened since independence. What have we done? We have created governments in which we have African black ministers, and that's about it. They have not taken the system, lifted it up, thrown it away and examined it. They have carried on business as usual. That's the fault that has happened. They have none of them, and I don't know, I don't like to say it is too late, but it may be even too late now to get minds that have been conditioned to think like third world colonial peoples to want to change. They would want to stay, as all of them have stayed, in a neo-colonialist state. Neo-colonialism is as bad and as detrimental as colonialism was. Any form of colonialism is bad. And this is something that we have to face. That is why I said to the Prime Minister, you have no right to be going to Europe to ask Europe what's going to happen to us when the European economic community comes in being. And you know what she wrote in the paper, that was written in the papers when some of the local guys interviewed her. You know what she said? If we cannot get subsidies for our bananas, which is the main product, not only in one country, but in all those little islands in the Caribbean, they live by bananas, subsidized by Britain. And you know what the lady said? If we cannot get that, we face absolute ruin. These are exact words. I cannot accept that. Nobody has said anything about it. What it means, Britain cannot give you an undertaking that is going to subsidize your bananas. Britain belongs to a family of 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 countries. Britain may say yes, but the other countries are not going to. France is not going to say yes. Germany, West Germany is not going to say yes. And those other countries are not going to say yes. So what's going to happen? They're going to turn it down. So I told her, I said, don't wait until I do something about it now. Do something about it. She said, I said, look, you've wasted a lot of time. You have never tried for us to do business with each other. We have never tried to sell to each other, to pool our commodities as a region. We have never tried that. We say the language barrier messes us up. It didn't mess no Columbus. The man came there and in 2 days he was telling Isabella what these people are, what kind of thing they speak. The man didn't know a blasted thing, big liar that he was. And he could tell Isabella and Ferdinand what these people were, who they were, what they were doing, their art, their culture, their everything. And we've been here 500 years and we're saying language is a barrier. It's the fault of the government again. You live in the Caribbean and you want to tell me that you only speak the language of the conqueror? The English people speak British, speak English. What about the other places there? We don't exchange students. We don't send our students to learn different. We don't teach these things, our students. A Caribbean people come here quicker than they'll go from an island to an island. They will. I know many women in the island of Dominica have never been to the capital, but they've been to Brooklyn. They've been to Brooklyn. I know people say, have you been to Antigua? What are you going to Antigua for? I'm going to see my child in Brooklyn. And so it is. What I'm saying is that, again, I notice Dr. J likes to use it, Gary likes to use it, and I'll say that again. The answer is in our own hands. We do not have let me end with we do not have the spirit of Garvey anymore. We had men who called themselves Pan-Africanists. Today, Pan-Africanism is totally lost. If we had that spirit today that these men had, C.L. James, Leon Damas, George Padmore, if we had that spirit today, we would be able to do something together. And this is the kind of spirit that I'm talking about. Let me read one short verse of what I'm saying here. It is written by, that poem is written by Amos, who is still alive. He's 85 years, but he's still alive. He's one of the great Pan-Africanists. In fact, he taught Fanon. He was the principal of a school in Martinique where Fanon comes from, and Césaire taught Fanon at that school. It was a good pupil he had. And Césaire wrote a poem on going back home, returning back to self, finding self and returning self. And this is what he said. This is the spirit that we need today. And this is what he wrote, just one short verse. Listen to the white world, horribly tired from its immense effort. Hear its rebellious joints, cracking under the hard stars, its blue steel stiffness piercing the mystical flesh. Hear its victories trumpeting its defeats. Hear its miserable stumbling accompanied by grandiose alibis. Pity for our conquerors, omniscient and naive. Europe, I give my support to all that powders the sky with its insolence, to all that is loyal and fraternal, to all that has the courage to be eternally new, to all that can give its heart to fire, to all that has the strength to burst from an inexhaustibly sap, to all that is calm and sure, to all that is not you. Europe, pompous name for excrement. Thank you, brothers and sisters. Thank you, my brothers and sisters.
The archives is huge. It's 30,000 hours. Help me digitize it, organize it, and save it for African people.